Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for being here and welcome to today's workshop. And I'm sorry about that. Today's workshop, Harness the Power of Belonging. And this is face-to-face programming with SELChicago. My name is Janet de la Luz. I am the coordinator for the Back to the Arts Parent University. I'm sorry about that. Okay, things to know for our workshop. This session will be recorded and we want to share this knowledge with our parents who were unable to attend. Our YouTube channel is on the screen and you will also find it on the chat as well. We will have a presentation followed by a conversation with Kristen. The chat will also be open throughout the meeting to allow participants to type any questions or comments they want to type in. Please keep in mind that we might not have the time to get through all the questions in the chat. Please mute your mics, be respectful with your comments, be brief when sharing, and also you can register for our newsletter and our link is in the screen and you could also find that in the chat as well. Our next session, so on Wednesday at 12 p.m., we're going to have a ODLSS workshop, and that is in regards to Assistive Technology Resource Center. That's going to be our English workshop. And at 10 a.m., we have a Kofi workshop, and that's going to be a Spanish workshop as well. Friday, we're going to have an ISAC workshop at 11, and that's post-secondary chat. Okay, once again, thank you everybody and welcome to our Harnessing the Power of Belonging. My name is Janet de la Luz and this is a face-to-face program workshop with SELChicago. And our presenter for today is Kristen. Kristen, do you mind sharing with us a little bit about yourself?
Of course, except I was muted. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. My name's Kristen, and more than anything, I think for me, more than important than anything else is that I'm a mom. So I've got a 7th grader and an 8th grader, and they both attend Ravenswood Elementary, and they are officially taller than I am. That happened. We just figured it out. They are officially taller. Their chins go right on top of my head. I have been a CPS parent since my children have entered school in kindergarten, and the work that I do in the world, we have an organization called SELChicago, and what we seek to do is to have as many conversations with adults so that we can gather together, know a lot about human development, and also share information about dignity-centered practices so that adults use as many dignity-centered practices as possible when we are with children. Thinking that when we center our children's dignity, they will grow up and be able to center their own as well as advocate for others. I'm curious if there are folks who have attended SELChicago programming before. So welcome. We are doing this presentation in English today and then in Spanish in 2 weeks. The slides that you'll see are both in English and in Spanish. So I support both languages. Could you put into the chat if you have been in SELChicago programming in the past? I'll just check that out. So if you type either no or yes in the chat, if you have been in SELChicago programming in the past. And if you are looking for it, the chat is most likely at the bottom of your screen. So a no and a yes. Okay. And that helps me understand so that we will be able to lean into some concepts that I always want to provide. So I'm going to share my screen I see that many of you have not attended. The title of this workshop was called Harnessing the Power of Belonging. And when I was looking at the translation of harnessing, it was very much about utilizing. It was about how it can be almost manipulated, the translation. And so language is so powerful. And I really thought about harnessing as the idea of a tool. So if I were to retitle this workshop, I would call it Understanding and Celebrating the Power of Belonging. Really with this idea that belonging in relationships is what creates trust, is what creates safety. And as many, whatever actions we can do as adults for the children in our care can help celebrate that. So we're going to be harnessing and understanding and celebrating the power of belonging together tonight. So I work with schools, I work with parents, I work with families, I work with teacher preparation programs to share many tools that center dignity as possible. You have my commitment of confidentiality, and you'll also have opportunities to have SELChicago office hours. It's very likely that we might be talking about something and you want to go a little bit deeper. So SELChicago offers office hours, and I'll say more about that at the end of our time together. I would like for us to gather together, thinking about something that's really going well. So maybe you're joining and you lead a family. Maybe you're joining and you lead a family and you lead a classroom. So thinking about something that's really going well. And then when you think about that, also, how do you feel about that? And I wanted to show you these emotions wheels. They have the basic human emotions: sad, in English, sad, mad, scared, peaceful, powerful, and joyful. Glad has been kind of separated out into 3 different emotions. And if you would, I want to make sure that we create some belonging. So I'm going to put together some breakout rooms. And if we have breakout rooms of 3, there'll be 3 to 4 participants in a room. So we're going to go into those small breakout rooms and just center those 2 questions. You can share what's really going well in the family if you'd like, but share the feeling. When you think about what's really going well in your family, how do you feel? And we're going to have breakout rooms for 3 minutes with 60 seconds to come back. So you're not going to be there very long. It's going to be really quick. All right. Are there any questions? Oops. Let me recreate these breakout rooms here for a moment. Oop. Hold on. Pardon me. As I was creating them, I made a mistake. So you are going to be allowed to return to the main session at any time. I'm going to recreate the rooms. There we go. And Janet, I'm going to move you to a room that is, or actually just if you would not go into the room, because if you go into the room, then the room is going to be recorded. Okay. All right, here we go.
I'll stay here in the main room.
All right. Here we are. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I got it.
All right. Hey, Della. My name's Kristen. You're coming in and we're doing a quick gathering together to create some community. The question is thinking about something that's really going well in your family and how you feel about that. So I'm going to invite you to a breakout room and I'm going to join you as well. Okay. You're going to be going into breakout room number 1. And I'm going to join breakout room number 1 myself. All right. I closed the breakout rooms, so we'll be coming back in. Hoping people are getting and enjoyed being connected. I said that something that was going well in my family is that something wasn't going well, and then we, with one of my kids academically, and we were able to get connected around it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I appreciate you being connected with someone that you don't know, most likely anyway. And I don't want you to share what's going well in your family, although I'm excited that things, for whatever is going well, but I am curious about how you feel. What was the emotion you came up with when you were in your breakout rooms? And if you could type that into the chat. So a mixture of sadness and happiness, I see. I was relieved, comfortable. Roberto, I see your hands up. You please feel to unmute. Absolutely.
Kristen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so I just, the time was short, but my
I know.
partner, I felt just a connectedness with my partner. So she shared with me that she recently moved into a neighborhood, and I shared with her that my daughter graduated from a particular high school that she graduated from. And so I just felt it was just a wonderful feeling, you know, to share that moment.
I can hear the joy, Roberto, in your voice with that moment.
Yes, that's a good, yes, joy. Yes.
Which is really exciting. So from an emotional perspective, the reason we ask, and welcome if you've just joined, I'm going to share the screen. The reason I asked about, something that's going well, and when you think about that, how do you feel, is that when we ask ourselves to think about how we feel, it asks us and calls from us something called emotional granularity. And emotional granularity is a term that, I'm going to type this in the chat, emotional granularity. It is something that allows us, it's a self-regulation piece, when we can be really specific about the emotion that we're experiencing. I can't type and talk at the same time, granularity. When we can be really specific about the emotion that we're feeling, we can imagine what someone else feels. So it helps build empathy. And also when we're thinking about belonging and we're thinking about emotions that we feel, not everyone has had the experience of being able to safely feel their emotions. I often ask the question, have you ever been in a gathering where you were said, or it was said about you, you're so emotional, and you knew that that was not a compliment? Bruce Perry, who is one of the leading thought leaders around trauma-informed practices and trauma in general, says that we are feeling creatures who think. And often we receive messages that we should be thinking creatures who feel, but the feelings come first. So why I bring this up right away is that I'm really interested in making sure that I level set with what SELChicago believes. So SELChicago deeply believes that we are all doing the best we can with the tools and the resources that we have, the skills and the resources we have. And our patience is a resource, our self-regulation is a resource, our ability to pause and to get other people's perspectives is a resource. All of those are, and we're doing the best we can. Everyone is doing the best we can with the skills and resources we have. And if we're not doing well, and this is especially for children, if we're not doing well, it's because we may not have a skill, or a child, whatever is being provided or asked for from adults, from our children, are potentially, their skill level is just beyond it, or we may not have the resource to manage that right now. And if that's true, the other SELChicago belief is that behavior is communication. When I think about this, if we're all doing the best we can with the skills we have and the resources we have, then behavior is some sort of combination of whatever our skill levels are and whatever our levels of discouragement or encouragement are. And thinking about when why we're here, when we're speaking about belonging can also be about encouragement. The other big belief that we have is that learning about human development and breaking neuroscience down into actionable things for use in relationship helps us better support those in our care, including ourselves. And this is when I asked who had seen SELChicago programming before. If you have seen SELChicago programming before, it's very likely that the hand model of the brain has been shared. So I want to take a moment, because there were many no's to the answer of, have you seen SELChicago programming before? Gentleman by the name of Dan Siegel and a woman by the name of Mary Hartzell wrote a book called Parenting from the Inside Out, originally in 2003. And it was in this book that Dan Siegel spoke about the hand model of the brain. And I'd like to invite you, wherever you are, to make a fist and to cover it up with your fingers. And I'd like you to imagine that your fingers are purple, your thumb is blue, and there's a little red spot on your wrist. And when we are integrated, and I'm using the closed fist with the thumb covered, when we are integrated, when we are in a state of calm readiness, our cortex the big part of our brain, our cortex, is ready to process, is ready to learn, is ready to look out into the world and say, how can I solve this problem? What here can I learn? And the other piece about that state of calm readiness, oh, whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. The other state of that state of calm readiness is that we can lean in, take a look at your fingernails, if you will. We can lean in, and our fingernails represent our prefrontal cortex. That's the last part of the brain that fully matures. And it's the part of the brain that has our empathy, our compassion, our flexibility, literally our ability to maintain our own self-regulation. But sometimes something happens, something small or something big. And before your cortex knows it, it might stop working or stop thinking when you flip your lid. And using another hand on fingers, this has now become my sign of, this is when we're disconnected from our control center. We're disconnected from the cortex. And our limbic system might be running the show. The limbic system's question, am I liked? Am I loved? Do I belong? Or our brainstem, our safety center. And if I'm not feeling safe, the things that my brain center tells my body to do, fight, flight, freeze. So knowing that this idea of self-regulation is something that we learn over time. It's a skill we build over time. And we do it in the presence of co-regulated adults. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. The other thing that I like to think about is that we have these things called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons can make it very difficult for us to stay regulated in other people's upset. I'll stop the share for a second. Have you ever laughed when someone else laughed? Or cried when someone cried? Or been totally fine, and then you encountered someone who was really upset and you got upset too? And so our mirror neurons are the things that make it really challenging in the presence of someone else's upset to stay regulated. And so knowing that we have these mirror neurons, we can use them as a part of our belongingness. And so we'll talk about that as well. This other deep belief from something that I want to share is that leading young people while centering their dignity is often a learned skill for adults. So leading young people while centering young people's dignity is a learned skill for adults. And it's challenged by our own resources. It's challenged by how long our day goes. It's challenged by the challenges that we have in our lives that young people come along with us, but they are not responsible for. So as a reflection, if you're willing, I'm wondering if you would be willing to mention behaviors that you might see that might be challenging. So behaviors that you see that might be challenging. And there's a way to do this that respects our anonymity. And I'm looking for my, oops. Let me share this with you. If you go to Mendycom, it was supposed to come up in my slide and it didn't. So if you go to Mendycom and you type in a code, and that code is, get this for you. The code is 2841-1559. Menti.com, and the code is 2841 1559. Two 2841 1559. We'll leave that up for a minute. What I like about the Menti.com, if you're having a problem finding it, just unmute yourself, let us know. What I like about this is that it's anonymous. And you can enter something. So we have arguing. Upset. I'm going to share some other things that people have said. Not listening. Not doing homework. Challenges with transitions. I've seen lying. So in my experience with some of these, having asked this question to multiple audiences, the behaviors that often come up, right? The behaviors that we see sometimes, if we consider an iceberg, the behaviors are at the tip of the iceberg. If we apply that model of we're all doing the best we can with the skills we have, and that underneath the waterline, when we see an iceberg, we only see 10%. Underneath the waterline, there are reasons that a young person may act in a way that's challenging. So what might some of those be? You could put that into the chat. There were some other things that came up on the Menti that would be tip of the iceberg: not listening, not focusing. So I'd like to offer that the reasons that a young person may be showing us challenging behaviors could be a variety of things. They could be confused. They could be upset. They could have deep uncertainty. They could be mourning. I don't want to discount the fact that we are exiting from a pandemic that has hit our city gravely. And our children have been certainly feeling that upset. And it could be that they're not experiencing a space or a place where they're being celebrated. It could be that they could be showing us developmentally appropriate behaviors. I'm typing that in the chat. I already see that I've made a mistake with my spelling. So they could be showing us developmentally appropriate behaviors, and they could be showing us behaviors that are completely appropriate for whatever neurodiversity that they may be managing, they may be navigating. So I'd like to shift that focus. And I want to shift that focus to a different way of being, a different way of thinking. So thinking about belonging. So I'd like you to imagine that you have an invitation to a party and you attend, and you walk in and the vibe of the room is perfect for you. And the music is perfect. and the host is welcoming, and you have this embodied sense of belonging. And I'm wondering how that might feel. I've updated the Menti.com, the Mentimeter. So there is my piece. And that's a place for you when you have an embodied sense of belonging. Happy and excited, and it feels like you're alive. I see those coming into the chat. Content, connected, secure, ready. So the reason I ask that question, ready for what's next? I see those in the chat. Thank you. The reason I ask that question is that I want to define, you're attending a conversation to talk about belonging. And I want to define belonging and bring in the definition of belonging from two folks who literally wrote a book on it, Cobb and Cranapple, in education. And their definition of belonging is the extent to which people feel personally, in the moment, appreciated and validated and accepted and treated fairly within an environment. So appreciated and validated and accepted and treated fairly within an environment. And I should say right now that I want everyone who would like to have copies of these slides to get copies of these slides. So if you would like a copy of these slides, if you put your email in the chat, I'll make sure that you get them I get them to you. So when we're thinking about belonging, going deeper than that, going to a developmental space, Maya Angelou says, we need each other as the earth we share. Rudolf Dreikers says human beings are social beings and our basic motivation is to belong. And from a developmental place, our nervous systems, we seek secure attachment. We live in the world, we navigate through the world so that we can find belonging with others. And our nervous systems are constantly seeking secure attachment to be supported on our life's journey. We are supported by presence of responses that increase our personal experiences of safety, of soothing, and of feeling seen. So thinking about that, I want to ask another question. Because Cobb and Cranapple, in their book, Belonging, Creating a Culture of Dignity, they took Maslow's hierarchy of needs and presented it on the stair step. And I'd like you to take a look at where belonging is on this original Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The idea is if we have our physiological needs met, we have food, we have water, we have the ability to toilet, right? Then we have our needs of safety, our personal security met. Then we find belonging. Then we can achieve. And again, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Maslow had self-actualization at the top of the pyramid. So Cobb and Cranapple talk about spaces often where young people navigate, where this is what they experience. And if you're willing, I'd like you to ask and note it. I'd like to ask you, what do you notice about this? What do you notice about the difference between what belonging is in a book and then what people, often our children, might experience. What do you see? There's this. So I'm going to read the things, and please, if you put something in the chat and you'd like to, and I'm not seeing hands, so if you do want to unmute yourself, please go ahead and unmute. But someone wrote the stairs are steeper and challenging in the second one, and the height of there seems to be a height of escalation.
I see that they have to climb to get there.
They have to climb to get there.
Yep.
Instead of just walking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we have challenges to climbing, and right, if that assignment is really difficult and I don't know how to ask for help, if that assignment is really difficult and I don't feel like I can ask for help, then it might be even harder to achieve. Anyone else?
I noticed that belonging is actually having a decline after achievements.
Ooh. Ooh, could you say that again? Ooh.
That the belonging is a decline after achievements.
I'm going to stop the share for just a second. As a mom who has just navigated 7th grade last year, and I've got an 8th grader this year, I have two really, really different kids personally. And when I think about these two different children and how the stairs, for some of them, the stairs are really, really easy to climb, and for others, the stairs are harder. I think about belonging, like if I've achieved, then belonging might feel like a come down. Miss Reed, was it you who said that? I'm not sure who said that into the space.
No, I don't know who said that, but I love that too.
It was Miss Nash. Sorry.
Oh, Miss Nash. Hi, Miss Nash.
Hi.
So, and then what the other thing that you made me, that sharing, and I'm grateful for it, made me think about is that belonging, that achievement becomes currency for belonging. And I might pay for my belonging, or might not feel like I can belong unless I'm achieving. And I just want to raise my hand and say, I know that in moments in my children's 7th grade year, last year in the pandemic, I created a vibe about belonging. And I created a vibe about achievement being the currency for belonging in my house. And anyone else want to share something that they see? I want to share this again. I want to bring it back into the neuroscience piece of upset. Like if we're thinking about the hand model of the brain, we're thinking about belonging. It could also be that if we when we have an opportunity to achieve, we might get dysregulated. If we feel that as a barrier to belonging, and we might, if we don't feel belonging, have a difficult time achieving. So it's almost as though that's a self-fulfilling cycle. Does that make sense?
Yes, in this moment, I feel stuck because in pandemic times, my son he's in 7th grade, but in the last year in his 6th grade, he feel comfortable inside his room, and I tried many things to do to take it out in the room, but he's not. He say, no, I'm feel good. I feel comfortable right here. I tried to speak with him about his feeling, and I tried to explain to him how I'm feeling in that moment because he's in the room all the time. I take online classes. My house is have monetary problems. In that moment, last year, I feel more, I think it's more comfortable than this year because this year is in person, in person classes, but I think it's more challenging for me because he's staying, and the last year he stayed in my house. I looking for him. He's never sick, coming sick. For now in the school, he's probably sick, and he have problem with a classmate because he's not feel good in the classroom with his classmate. He stay alone all the time, the teacher told me. And I feel frustrated and stuck because I don't know how help him to take up with this song, you know? For this reason, my studies, I hope I advance one step, but I go far too. You know, it's, I don't know, it's difficult time.
Does Ms. Maria, I know that you're not alone. Has anyone else on the call, you can, with your reactions buttons or a yes in the chat, have you experienced some of the same challenges? I can imagine just people are getting to their computers to type yes into the chat. I see the reaction buttons. You are not alone. Absolutely. The challenges of being in that space with our children and then watching our children navigate. One piece that I would like to encourage us to talk about is you have a sixth grader, right? And sorry, you have a seventh grader. So anyone who is in adolescence right now, I'm gonna break away just for a moment. Adolescence as a developmental phase of life, that we have challenges, and our children are naturally and responsibly pressing against the boundaries. And I'm kind of pressing against the boundaries of my little Zoom call, right? They're pressing against the boundaries, our boundaries, and they are challenged because they have been away from their peers. So they need their peers, but they've also been away from their peers. So some of that silence, the need for privacy, is actually developmentally appropriate. And then I'm thinking about how we navigate that. And I see someone else who wrote in the chat, it's difficult to navigate in a society that's hyper-capitalistic and individualistic. Sometimes I feel lost in a city that does not see me. Yes, feeling that deeply. And it's interesting that you say that, I think, because when we think about belonging and thinking about creating secure attachments, can seem, if we want individualistic practices, secure attachments kind of feel not logical, right? And yet our humanness needs it. Our humanness craves it. And then I see someone else. I just want to speak this into the chat. I have only one son, and not only does he get lonely, but he also gets rejected. And what a particular pain. That must, I'm sitting in that with how challenging that is, not only for him, but also for the adults supporting him. So from an idea about attachment place, from this place of thinking about attachment, thinking about practices that can help. When we think about this belonging, if behaviors communication, which is something that you've seen before in this session anyway, and behaviors a skill level plus encouragement level, behavior could be a barometer of how one is feeling belonging. So I want to offer something I did not offer in the beginning of the class, of our time together. I want to make sure I'm speaking and using as many examples that are as helpful as possible for you and your children. Would you be willing to put into the chat the general ages of your children? So if you could put into the chat the general ages of your children. So 8, 13 and 14, 14, 9 and 7, 16, 13, 8. A special shout out for those of you who are parents of children who span ages. I see 18, 7 and 10 months. Mwah. So much love to you. Elementary age 5, 7, 13, 14, 10 and 7, 10 and 19. So especially for parents of children who have very large age brackets, it's a certain type of challenge. All parenting is challenging, but there's a certain type of challenge for the parent that has multiple children that span a decade or more, because in one moment, you have to be and seek the needs of 2 totally different age brackets. So I want to share with you, when we think about attachment, if we're seeking belonging, when we're first born, our brainstem, that part of our brain that is the alarm center, fully formed, ready to take on the world and have people tell us when we can tell people when we're hungry, we can tell people when we need comfort, we can tell people when we need a diaper change. Our communication is crying, right? So our brainstems are fully formed, and our limbic system, our cortex grows in relation with others. And I want to share this with you. I almost think like coming out of the pandemic is almost an opportunity. This is going to sound so hokey, to reborn, but we're re-entering the world with the other human beings, and I feel like it's an enormous opportunity. So I want to share with you the 4 S's of safety, and the 4 S's of secure attachment, which help us feel safe. These come from Dan Siegel, who's the person who created the hand model of the brain. And in secure attachment, we feel seen, we feel safe, we feel soothed, we feel secure. So how can we think about what are some of the actions as adults that we can help create for our children? So in seen, our children will feel seen if they are supported by our actions that communicate our perception of children deeply and empathetically. So what can we do that communicates, I see you? What can we do that communicates you're not alone? For the 10-month-old, right? We attend to their needs as often as we can, speaking our way. right? I'm imagining, so I just want to let you know that I did not change my children's diapers like this all the time. I learned a lot of these skills well after my children were in their 0 to 3 stage. But if we're changing a diaper, right, or fixing a meal or setting a table, sharing with our children what we're doing, accepting their help, sharing with them, almost narrating what we're doing. If we have a 16-year-old, if we have a 13-year-old, and the door is often closed, sliding notes under the door, sitting beside them, maybe not saying anything, just our presence beside them, saying things something like, I'm here for you, come find me when you're ready. When we commit to seeing seen, we build belonging. Also, I should also say that belonging and that sense of belonging is also a sense of trust. All of these 4 S's of secure attachment can help us build trust. Safe. In order for our children to feel safe, what can we do to support actions and responses that avoid frightening them, that avoid harming them, that avoid pushing them away from us? The idea behind this piece is that when we provide actions and responses that help build connection, if they are afraid, they can come toward us. If they are afraid, they can come toward us. And I'll share with you, I had a moment over the weekend. My daughter had something and it broke, and she was so nervous and so scared to say it, so scared to say anything. I can say as frequently as possible, right? Everything's okay, just come and tell me. But she saw the look on my face, and that communicated to her. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I know we're recording. That communicated to her that I was angry. Just the look on my face. I'm deeply grateful that she said, "But Mama, you look so angry." And what was true is that when she called for help, in that moment that she called for help, I came running because she called for help. But what I really had to do was go to the bathroom. I hope you're laughing. Right? In that moment, it was my job, right? I could say to her what that was, but she still felt in that moment, because of my facial expression, that it wasn't there, that she wasn't safe. Our children learn these things over time with repetition. In order to feel soothed, supported by actions and responses that help children accept and process and deal with emotions. And so one of the reasons to build that wheel of think about that wheel that we first mentioned, which is that emotions wheel, we can share that, we can help support them with responses that help them process their emotions when we share how we're feeling. We can help them by listening to their feelings. We can help them by sharing with them, by saying to them when they share that they're upset, "Can you tell me more about that?" So that they feel that their feelings are valid. And secure is supported by actions that help children develop an internalized sense of well-being. My hope is that our children, as they are experiencing their classrooms and they're experiencing their homes, that they are supported in these secure attachments, both at home and in the classroom. Which is why whenever I am working with teachers in training, working with school leaders, thinking about when we see misbehaviors, what we might be seeing is a request. Think about it from this way. Could you see me? Could you help me feel safe? Could you help me with soothing? And could you share with me that I'm secure here in your presence? I want to pause because that's a lot of words, and ask how this lands with you. Is this, I've been trying to see if this was, is it helpful? Do you have any thoughts that come up? I see a hand raised. Roberto?
Hey, Christine.
Hi.
So for me, this has been incredibly helpful in understanding how to build community, how to help our children in the district to create that sense of belonging. I'm wondering, right, it seems like this is a very powerful resource that we could use in every CPS school. And I'm wondering, like, how do we implement this? How do we make sure that every school is using some elements of this sense of belonging, right? This healing centered. I know the district in the last couple of years has done amazing work to issue some of these initiatives to help our students, right? To feel that they have self-worth or valued, seen, and cared for, right? And appreciate everything that you discuss. So like, how do we get this into our communities, into our schools?
Oh, Roberto, it's such a deep question. I'll share with you my thought and hope, right? Chicago shares a home with the Collaborative on Academic and Social Emotional Learning. It's an organization called, also known as CASTLE. And CASTLE says when they're thinking about a framework, when they're thinking about a school, that if a school wants to move towards these practices, then the first thing that they need to do is get a small core group of people who are really committed to these practices. Because when we think about looking at children and centering their dignity, right? It seems like it should not feel so radical, but it often is very, very different from how we have navigated schools over the lifetime of an educator or even ourselves, right? We have, as a district, in just the last 8 years, moved from zero tolerance environments to trauma-informed, more restorative practices being a part of our student code of conduct. So it is a process, and I've worked with a lot of schools navigating some of this process with the adults. But the second piece, and I'm assuming that there are probably not only parents on the call, but there are also probably members of PACs and BACs and LSCs on the call. If any school is moving towards enhancing their social emotional learning practice, the second castle point is to focus on the SEL of adults. So in the bill, this is not necessarily about our children, right? But in the building, I'm going to put up the slide again. In the building, are we as adults supporting one another? So we're communicating our care of one another deeply. Are we supporting ourselves so that our actions and responses avoid frightening and harming, or gossiping or blaming or shaming? Are we supporting our adults to help us accept and process and deal with emotions? And are we supporting ourselves with actions that are going to help internalize a sense of well-being? I think many buildings are. I think it's a priority for it. I know it's a priority for the district. The more adults who can share some of these practices and share them both with teachers that they know, with school leaders that they know, and how are they actionable? That's one other question I have. Could we play? I'd like to play a little bit with how can we put this action into practice? Because I always want to leave any sort of meeting with some sort of actionable practice. Like, what does this look like in the moment? And in order to do that, I want to play it's not a game, but I want to have you have an experience of embodied belonging with language. And so I'm going to share the screen one more time.
Okay, we're gonna give a second to Kristen. I think that we lost her for a second. So let's give her a minute, hopefully. There she is. Hi, Kristen. We lost you for a second.
It's me. I hit the leave button instead of the share button. I'm sorry. As you might imagine, I was going along really well, and then I just got really dysregulated. So I just want to take a breath. May I ask if you had put your email into the chat before because you wanted a copy of this slide deck? I'm going to ask you to do that again because I did not save the chat before I left, and it doesn't save automatically when I do. So if you could put that back in. All right, let me get back in to the slideshow. Thank you very much. I see the emails coming in. Would like to offer you a sense of embodied belonging. How can we take a piece of this and move it in action with the children in our care, within our sphere of influence? So I'd like you to, wherever you're sitting, I'd like you to pretend that you're a young person. I'm going to be sharing some statements with you. I'd like you to pretend that you are a young person and listen to the statements as though you were a young person. I'd like you not to pretend that you are your own child, but a child around the same age, maybe you at around your child's age. And I'd like you to pay attention to the thoughts and feelings. I'm going to be the adult. I'd like you to pay attention to the thoughts and feelings as I'm communicating with you. And then we'll have an opportunity to reflect and share. I'm going to be reading 2 sets of statements. And here we go. So, brush your teeth. Don't forget your coat. Do your homework. Stop fighting with your brother. Hurry up and get dressed. We're going to be late. Stop whining. Pick up these toys. And if you're hearing it, like, or I'll give them to children who don't have any. All right. I'd like you to take a deep breath. And I'd like you to think about, after that first set, what were the physical sensations did you have in your body? What emotions came up for you? And what were you thinking? What were you deciding? That was the first set of questions. And I'll read in the chat. Okay, I'm not sure if anyone has called in. I'll read in the chat. They were all negative. So you felt muscle tightness, you felt stressful, you felt confused. Yeah. Maybe a little afraid. And what were you deciding about me? Like, this adult is fill in the blank. And I won't take it personally, I promise. This adult is tired. This adult really is tired, actually. This adult's mad. Yep. This adult's an authoritarian. Yeah, this adult's getting on my nerves. I appreciate that. Right. And if I'm getting on your nerves, you probably stop listening. All right. And would you fill in the blank? I am. When I was in that adult space, what were you thinking about yourself from the perspective of a child? I am. I'm to obey and not ask questions. Yeah, I'm not important. I am a dictator. Yeah, I think I'm sounding like a sergeant. So that's what you were feeling about me. All right. So I'd like you to, I want to offer, if you would be willing to kind of feel your body, taking a deep breath. And same adult, that's just me, but another set of statements. What do you need so that your teeth will feel clean? What are you taking so you won't be cold outside? What's your plan for doing your homework? How can you and your brother work together to solve this problem? Where do the dishes go? And what needs to happen to them when we finished eating? What can you do so that we can leave on time? How can we communicate more respectfully? And what's your responsibility when you're done playing with your toys? I'm putting the questions in the chat so you can see them. But for that second group of statements, that second group, if you were listening to it as a child, what emotions came up? What were you thinking? What were you deciding? So in that second group of statements, I see that someone felt afraid. I'm reading that from the chat. Anyone else? We felt welcome to the space to share our family values, responsibilities, and care. Before you made those statements, I was thinking that when I'm nice, they ignore me. Ooh. while I was saying the second group of statements, what were you deciding about me? The second, the adult. This adult is and as you're thinking about that question, what was written into the chat was, before you made the statements, I was thinking that when I'm nice, they ignore me. But after hearing the statements, I felt empowered. So it's a very subtle shift. Ooh, empowered and put the ball in their court. You felt warm and respectful. So it's a subtle shift of language. But I wanted to share this particular thought. Here are the statements. I wanted to share this particular thought and say that this first group of statements was directive. It was telling. It was directional. And the second group of statements are all questions. And would there be someone who'd be willing to unmute and write and speak the first question in each one of these statements? The first word.
What? Do you want me to read the whole sentence?
No, not the whole sentence. Just read off the first word of each of the sentences.
What, how, where, what, how, what.
Can I ask you one question before you unmute? There's a word that we often associate or use when we're talking to a child about their misbehavior. That's not there.
You.
Right? And then someone wrote into the chat, why?
Yeah, why did you do that?
Why did you do that? Right? So yeah, I'm very familiar with that sentence, by the way. I just want to let you know that just because I teach this stuff doesn't mean I do it all the time perfectly at all whatsoever. So this simple exercise, and I say it's simple, it actually can be pretty complex, because what it takes to do to ask these questions is to put the child at the center. And these are called curiosity questions, or leading with curiosity, which is really challenging for us to do when we're in someone else's upset. So it takes, I'm going to define co-regulation to do this. So if someone else is really upset, it takes you being regulated. So an offering that I'd like you to take this out into the world is to notice when you're telling. Telling, as you may have experienced before, sort of puts us on the defensive. It has us look either outside or maybe at ourselves with shame or blame or self-doubt. So notice when you're telling. Keep apprised of some of your body language and tone. One of the things that I did in the first set is I spoke really fast. I spoke very directly, and I kind of had a stern look on my face. And I can't do much about the stern look that seemed to be permanently on my face, but I can watch my tone, and I can watch my body language. So I can be soft in my trunk. I can tilt my head ever so slightly to the side. I can use a little bit more melodic voice. And that literally communicates to the person's nervous system that I'm safe. So I'm communicating safety with my body tone or with my body language and my actions. And then these curiosity questions: what, where, how, when. Another favorite of mine, which isn't on the slide, tell me more about that. Those questions tend to speak to the thinking part of the brain, the cortex part of the brain. And why we avoid why is because why tends to speak to that limbic or the safety part of the brain. And if we can avoid using the word why in conversations specifically about behavior, we can come up with a how or what or a when question, it can help us begin that conversation with partnership. So, and to increase that feeling of belonging. I'm noticing the time, and I want to make sure that we have some extra time for questions before we depart. I want to encourage again, if I have a couple of the other tools that I'd like to offer you in an email. And so if you put your email into the chat, I'm going to take care of that tonight. So you'll have the email of my slides this evening, along with some other resources. Before we depart, before we move to any questions that you have, I want to just leave you with these two things. One is my contact information. So you'll get it tonight as well, but Kristen Hovius at SELChicago. You can follow me on Facebook. I'm a little bit more unreliable on Instagram and Twitter, but I'm on Facebook. And I have a question for you, which is, what's one thing that you were taking away that was helpful? So what's one thing from tonight's both review of a little bit of last week and then new information that is helpful? Put that into the chat. I know Janet has a few things that she wants to say before she stops recording.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Kristen, this was an amazing workshop, and as you mentioned, we're going to stay a little bit longer to answer any questions or comments that are that we might have left over. And I want to thank you once again for this workshop. Thank you everybody for being here. Have a good night.
And you're stopping recording? Okay.
Paris,
Bye, everyone. But we're not going